Chapter 8 of Byways to Blessedness by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 8. Seeing No Evil. The solid universe is pervious to love. With bandaged eyes he never errs, around, below, above. His blinding light, his flingeth white on gods and Satan's brood, and reconciles by mystic wiles the evil and the good. Emerson. If thou thinkest evil, be thou sure thine acts will bear the shadow of the stain, and if thy thought be perfect, then thy deed will be as of the perfect, true, and pure. After Confucius. After much practice in forgiveness, and having cultivated the spirit of forgiveness up to a certain point, knowledge of the actual nature of good and evil dawns upon the mind, and a man begins to understand how thoughts and motives are formed in the human heart, how they develop, and how they take birth in the form of actions. This marks the opening of a new vision in the mind, the commencement of a nobler, higher, diviner life, for the man now begins to perceive that there is no necessity to resist or resent the actions of others towards him, whatever those actions may be, and that all along his resentment has been caused by his own ignorance, and that his own bitterness of spirit is wrong. Having arrived thus far, he will take himself with some questionings as these: Why this continual retaliation and forgiveness? Why this tormenting anger against another, and then this repentance and forgiveness? Is not forgiveness the taking back of one's anger, the giving up of one's resentment? And if anger and resentment are good and necessary, why repent of them and give them up? If it is so beautiful, so sweet, so peaceful, to get rid of all feelings of bitterness and to utterly and wholly forgive, would it not still be more beautiful and sweet and peaceful never to grow bitter at all, never to know anger, never to resent as evil the action of another, but always to live in the experience of that calm, pure, blissful love which is known when an act of forgiveness is done, and all unruly passion towards another is put away? If another has done me wrong, is not my hatred towards him wrong, and can one wrong right another? Moreover, has he by his wrong really injured me, or has he injured himself? Am I not injured by my own wrong rather than by his? Why, then, do I grow angry? Why do I resent, retaliate, and engage in bitter thoughts? Is it not because my pride is piqued, or my vanity wounded, or my selfishness thwarted? Is it not because my blind animal passions are aroused and allowed to subdue my better nature? Seeing that I am hurt by another person's attitude towards me because of my own pride or vanity, or ungoverned and unpurified passions, would it not be better to look to the wrong in myself, rather than the wrong in another, to get rid of pride and vanity and passion, and so avoid being hurt at all? By such self-questionings, and their elucidation in the light of mild thoughts and dispassionate conduct, a man, gradually overcoming passion and rising out of the ignorance which gave rise to passion, will at last reach that blessed state in which he will cease to see evil in others, and will dwell in universal good-will and love and peace. Not that he will cease to see ignorance and folly, not that he will cease to see suffering and sorrow and misery, not that he will cease to distinguish between acts that are pure and impure, right and wrong, for having put away passion and prejudice, he will see these things in full, clear light of knowledge, and exactly as they are, but he will cease to see anything, any evil power, in another which can do him injury, which he must violently oppose and strive to crush, and against which he must guard himself. Having arrived at right understanding of evil by purging it away from his own heart, he sees that it is a thing that does not call for hatred and fear and resentment, but for consideration, compassion, and love. Shakespeare, through one of his characters, says, "There is no darkness but ignorance." All evil is ignorance, is dense darkness of mind, and the removal of sin from one's mind is coming out of darkness into spiritual light. Evil is the negation of good, just as darkness is the negation or absence of light. And what is there in a negation to arouse anger or resentment? When night settles down upon the world, who is so foolish as to rail at the darkness? The enlightened man, likewise, does not accuse or condemn the spiritual darkness in men's hearts, which is manifested in the form of sin, though by gentle reproof he may sometimes point out where the light lies. Now the ignorance to which I refer as evil, or as the source of evil, is twofold. There is wrongdoing, which is committed without any knowledge of good and evil, and where there is no choice. This is unconscious wrongdoing. Then there is wrongdoing which is done in the knowledge that it ought not to be done. This is conscious wrongdoing. But both unconscious and conscious wrongdoing arise in ignorance, that is, ignorance of the real nature and painful consequences of the wrongdoing. Why does a man continue to do certain things which he feels he ought not to do? If he knows that what he is doing is wrong, where lies the ignorance? He continues to do those things because his knowledge of them is incomplete. He only knows he ought not to do them by certain precepts, without any qualms of conscience within. But he does not fully and completely understand what he is doing. He knows that certain acts bring him immediate pleasure, and so, in spite of the troubled conscience which follows that pleasure, he continues to commit them. He is convinced that the pleasure is good and desirable, and therefore to be enjoyed. He does not know that pleasure and pain are one, but thinks he can have the one without the other. He has no knowledge of the law which governs human actions. He never thinks of associating his sufferings with his own wrongdoing, but believes they are caused by the wrongdoing of others, or are the mysterious dispensations of Providence, and therefore not to be inquired into or understood. He is seeking happiness, and does those things which he believes will bring him most enjoyment, but he acts in entire ignorance of the hidden and inevitable consequences which attach to his actions. Said a man to me once, who was the victim of a bad habit, "I know the habit is a bad one, and that it does me more harm than good." And I said, "If you know what you are doing is bad and harmful, why do you continue to do it?" And he replied, "Because it is pleasant, and I like it." This man, of course, did not really know that his habit was bad. He had been told that it was, and he thought he knew or believed it was, but in reality he thought it was good, and that it was conducive to his happiness and well-being, and therefore he continued to practice it. When a man knows by experience that a thing is bad, and that every time he does it he injures his body, mind, or both, when his knowledge of that thing is so complete that he is acquainted with its whole train of baneful effects, then he cannot only not do it any longer, he cannot even desire to do it, and even the pleasure that was formerly in that thing becomes painful. No man would put a venomous snake in his pocket because it is prettily colored. He knows that a deadly sting lurks in those beautiful markings. Nor when a man knows the unavoidable pain and hurt which lie hidden in wrong thoughts and actions, does he continue to think and commit them. Even the immediate pleasure, which formerly he greedily sought, is gone from them. Their surface attractiveness has vanished. He is no longer ignorant concerning their true nature. He sees them as they are. I knew a young man who was in business, and although a member of a church, and occupying the position of voluntary religious instructor, he told me that it was absolutely necessary to practice lying and deception in business, otherwise sure and certain ruin would follow. He said he knew lying was wrong, but while he remained in business he must continue to do it. Upon questioning him I found, of course, that he never tried truth and honesty in his business, had not even thought of trying the better way, so firmly convinced was he that it was not possible for him to know whether it would be productive or ruin. Now did this young man know that lying was wrong? There was a perceptual sense only in which he knew, but there was a deeper and more real sense in which he did not know. He had been taught to regard lying as wrong, and his conscience bore out that teaching, but he believed that it brought him profit, prosperity, and happiness, and that honesty would bring him loss, poverty, and misery. In a word, he regarded lying, deep in his heart, as the right thing to do, and honesty as the wrong practice. He had no knowledge whatever of the real nature of the act of lying, how it is, on the instant of its committal, loss of character, loss of self-respect, loss of power, usefulness, and influence, and loss of blessedness, and how it unerringly leads to the loss of reputation and loss of material profit and prosperity. Only when such a man begins to consider happiness of others, prefers to embrace the loss which he fears rather than clutch at the gain which he desires, will he obtain that real knowledge which lofty moral conduct alone can reveal, and then, experiencing the greater blessedness, he will see how, all along, he has been deceiving and defrauding himself rather than others, has been living in darkest ignorance and self-delusion. These two common instances of wrong-doing will serve to illustrate and make plainer, to those of my readers who, while searching for truth, are as yet doubtful, uncertain, and confused, the deep truth that all sin or evil is a condition of ignorance, and therefore to be dealt with in a loving and not a hateful spirit. And as with bad habits and lying, so with all sin, with lust, hatred, malice, envy, pride, vanity, self-indulgence, and selfishness, in all its forms. It is a state of spiritual darkness, the absence of the light of truth in the heart, the negation of knowledge. Thus when, by overcoming the wrong condition in one's heart, the nature of evil is fully realized, and mere belief gives place to living knowledge, evil can no longer be hatefully condoned and violently resisted, and the wrongdoer is thought of with tender compassion. And this brings us to another aspect of evil, namely, that of individual freedom, the right of every person to choose his own actions. Along with the seeing of evil in others is the desire to convert or coerce others into one's own ways of thinking and acting. Probably the commonest delusion in which men are involved is that of thinking that what they themselves believe and think and do is good, and all that is otherwise is evil, and therefore to be powerfully condemned and resisted. It is out of this delusion that all persecution springs. There are Christians who regard all atheists as men wholly evil, as given up to the service of an evil power, and there are atheists who firmly believe that all Christians are doing the greatest harm to the whole human race by their superstitious and false doctrines. The truth is that neither the Christian nor the atheist is evil, nor in the service of evil, but each is choosing his own way, and is pursuing that course which he is convinced is right. Let a man quietly contemplate the fact that numbers of followers of various religions the world over are, as they ever were, engaged in condemning each other as evil and wrong, and regarding themselves as good and right, and it will help him to realize how all evil is merely ignorance, spiritual darkness, and earnest meditation on that fact will be found to be one of the greatest aids in developing greater kindness, charity, insight, and breadth of mind. The truly wise and good man sees good in all, evil in none. He has abandoned the folly of wanting others to think and act as he thinks and acts, for he sees men are variously constituted, are at different points in their spiritual evolution, and must, of necessity, think and act differently. Having put away hatred, condemnation, egotism, and prejudice, he has become enlightened, and he sees that purity, love, compassion, gentleness, patience, humility, and unselfishness are manifestations of light and knowledge, while impurity, hatred, cruelty, passion, darkness, and ignorance, and that whether men are living in light or darkness, they are one and all doing that which they think is necessary, are acting in accordance with their own measure of light or darkness. The wise man understands, and understanding, he ceases from all bitterness and accusation. Every man acts in accordance with his nature, with his own sense of right and wrong, and is surely gathering in the results of his own experience. There is one supreme right which every being possesses: to think and act as he chooses. If he chooses to think and act selfishly, thinking of his own immediate happiness only and not that of others, then he will rapidly bring upon himself, by the action of the moral law of cause and effect, such afflictions as will cause him to pause and consider, and so find a better way. There is no teacher to compare with experience, no chastisement so corrective and purifying as that which men ignorantly inflict upon themselves. The selfish man is the ignorant man. He chooses his own way, but it is a way which leads to suffering, and through suffering to knowledge and bliss. The good man is the wise man. He likewise chooses his own way, but he chooses it in the full light of knowledge, having passed through the stages of ignorance and suffering, and arrived at knowledge and bliss. A man begins to understand what seeing no evil is when, putting away all personal desires in his judgments of others, so considers them from his own standpoint, and judges their actions not from his own standard but from theirs. It is because men set up arbitrary standards of right and wrong, and are anxious that all should conform to their particular standard, that they see evil in each other. A man is only rightly judged when he is not judged from my standard or yours, but from his own, and to deal with him thus is not judgment, but it is love. It is only when we look through the eyes of the impersonal love that we become enlightened, and see others as they really are, and a man is approaching that love when he can say in his heart, "Who am I that I should judge another? Am I so pure and sinless that I arraign men and pass the judgment of evil upon them? Rather let me humble myself and correct my own errors before assuming the position of supreme judge of those other men." It was said by one of old, to those who were about to stone, as evil, a woman taken in the act of committing one of the darkest sins, "He that is without sin, let him cast the first stone." And though he who said it was without sin, yet he took up no stone, nor passed any bitter judgment, but said, with infinite gentleness and compassion, "Neither do I condemn thee. Go, and sin no more." In the pure heart there is no room left where personal judgments and hatreds can find lodgment, for it is filled to overflowing with tenderness and love. It sees no evil, and only as men succeed in seeing no evil in others will they become free from sin and sorrow and suffering. No man sees evil in himself or his own acts except the man who is becoming enlightened, and then he abandons those acts which he has come to see are wrong. Every man justifies himself in what he does, and however evil others may regard his conduct, he himself thinks it to be good and necessary. If he did not, he would not and could not do it. The angry man always justifies his anger, the covetous man his greed, the impure man his unchastity. The liar considers that his lying is altogether necessary. The slanderer believes that, in vilifying the characters of those whom he dislikes, and warning other people against their evil natures, he is doing well. The thief is convinced that stealing is the shortest and best way to plenty, prosperity, and happiness, and even the murderer thinks there is a ground of justification for his deed. Every man's deeds are in accordance with the measure of his own light or darkness, and no man can live higher than he is or act beyond the limits of his knowledge. Nevertheless, he can improve himself, and thereby gradually increase his light and extend the range of his knowledge. The angry man indulges in abuse because his knowledge does not extend to forbearance and patience. Not having practiced gentleness, he does not understand it, and cannot choose it, nor can he know, by its comparison with the light of gentleness, the darkness of anger. It is the same with the liar, the slanderer, and the thief. He lives in this dark condition of mind and action because he is limited to it by his own immature knowledge and experience, because never having lived in the higher conditions, he has no knowledge of them, and it is, to him, as if they were non-existent. The light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. Nor can he understand even the conditions in which he is living, because, being dark, they are necessarily devoid of all knowledge. When a man is driven by repeated sufferings to at last reflect upon his conduct, and comes to see that his anger or lying, or whatever ignorant condition he may have been living in, is productive only of trouble and sorrow, he then abandons it, and commences to search for and practice the opposite and enlightened condition. And when he is firmly established in the better way, so that his knowledge of both conditions is complete, then he realizes in what great darkness he has formerly lived. This knowledge of good and evil by experience constitutes enlightenment. When a man begins to look, as it were, through the eyes of others, and to measure them by their own standard and not by his, then he ceases from seeing of evil in others, for he knows that every man's perception and standard of good and evil is different, that there is no vice so low but some men regard it as good, no virtue so high but some men regard it as evil, and what a man regards as good that to him is good, what he regards as evil that to him is evil. Nor will the purified man, who has ceased to see evil in others, have any desire to win men to his own ways or opinions, but will rather help them in their own particular groove, knowing that an enlarged experience only, and not merely change of opinion, can lead to higher knowledge and greater blessedness. It will be found that men see evil in those who differ from them, good in those who agree with them. The man who greatly loves himself and is enamored of his opinions will love all those who agree with him, and will dislike all those who disagree with him. If ye love them that ye love ye, what reward have ye? Love your enemies, do good to them that hate you. Egotism and vanity make men blind. Men of opposing religious views hate and persecute each other. Men of opposing political views fight and condemn each other. The partisan measures all men by his own standard, and sets up his judgments accordingly. So convinced is he that he is right and others wrong, that he at last persuades himself that to inflict cruelty on others is both good and necessary, in order to coerce them into his way of thinking and acting, and so bring them to the right, his right, against their own reason and will. Men hate, condemn, resist, and inflict suffering upon each other, not because they are intrinsically evil, not because they are deliberately wicked, and are doing, in the full light of truth, what they know to be wrong, but because they regard such conduct as necessary and right. All men are intrinsically good, but some are wiser than others, are older in experience than others. I recently heard, in substance, the following conversation between two men, whom I will call D and E. The third person, referred to as X, is a prominent politician. E. Every man reaps the result of his own thoughts and deeds, and suffers for his own wrong. D. If that is so, and if no man can escape from the penalty of his evil deeds, what an inferno some of our men in power must be preparing for themselves. E. Whether a man is in power or not, so long as he lives in ignorance and sin, he will reap sorrow and suffering. D. Look, for instance, at X, a man totally evil, given up entirely to selfishness and ambition. Surely great torments are reserved for such an unprincipled man. E. But how do you know he is so evil? D. By his works, his fruits. When I see a man doing evil, I know that he is evil, and I cannot even think of X, but I burn with righteous indignation. I am sometimes inclined to doubt that there is an overruling power for good when I see such a man in a position where he can do so much harm to others. E. What evil is he committing? D. His whole policy is evil. He will ruin the country if he remains in power. E. But while there are large numbers of people who think of X as you do, there are also large numbers, equally intelligent, who look on him as good and able, who admire him for his excellent qualities, and regard his policy as beneficent and making for national progress. He owes his position to these people. Are they also evil? D. They are deceived and misled, and this only makes X's evil all the greater, and that he can so successfully employ his talents in deceiving others in order to gain his own selfish ends. I hate this man. E. May it not be possible that you are deceived? D. In what way? E. Hatred is self-deception. Love is self-enlightenment. No man can see either himself or others clearly until he ceases from hatred and practices love. D. That sounds very beautiful, but it is impractical. When I see a man doing evil to others and deceiving and misleading them, I must hate him. It is right, and I should do so. X is without a spark of conscience. E. X may or may not be all you believe to be, but even if he is, according to your own words, should he be pitied and not condemned? D. How so? E. You say he is without a conscience. D. Entirely so. E. Then he is a mental cripple. Do you hate the blind because they cannot see, that dumb because they cannot speak, or the deaf because they cannot hear? When a captain has lost his rudder or broken his compass, do you condemn him because he did not keep his ship off the rocks? Do you hold him responsible for the loss of life? If a man is totally devoid of conscience, he is without the means of moral guidance, and all his selfishness must, perforce, appear to him good and right and proper. X may appear evil to you, but is he evil to himself? Does he regard his own conduct as evil? D. Whether he regards himself as evil or not, he is evil. E. If I were to regard you as evil because of your hatred for X, should I be right? D. No. E. Why not? D. Because in such a case hatred is necessary, justifiable, and righteous. There is such a thing as righteous anger, righteous hatred. E. Is there such a thing as righteous selfishness, righteous ambition, righteous evil? I should be quite wrong in regarding you as evil, because you are doing what you are convinced is right, because you regard your hatred for X as part of your duty as a man and citizen. Nevertheless, there is a better way than that of hatred, and it is the knowledge of this better way that prevents me from hating X as you do, because however wrong his conduct might appear to me, it is not wrong to him, nor to his supporters. Moreover, all men reap as they sow. D. What, then, is that better way? E. It is the way of love, the ceasing to regard others as evil. It is a blessed and peaceful state of heart. D. Do you mean that there is a state which a man can reach wherein he will grow angry when he sees people doing evil? E. No, I do not mean that, for while a man regards others as evil he will continue to grow angry with them. But I mean that a man can reach a state of calm insight and spotless love, wherein he sees no evil to grow angry with, wherein he understands the various natures of men, how they are prompted to act, and how they reap, as the harvest of their own thoughts and deeds, the tares of sufferings, and the corn of bliss. To reach that state is to regard all men with compassion and love. D. The state that you picture is a very high one. It is, no doubt, a very holy and beautiful one, but it is a state that I should be sorry to reach, and I should pray to be preserved from a state of mind where I could not hate a man like X with an intense hatred. Thus by this conversation it will be seen that D. regarded his hatred as good. Even so all men regard that which they do as necessary to be done. The things which men habitually practice are those things that they believe in. When faith in a thing wholly ceases, it ceases to be practiced. D's individual liberty is equal to that of other men, and he has a right to hate another if he so wishes, nor will he abandon his hatred until he discovers, by the sorrow and unrest which it entails, how wrong and foolish and blind it is, and how by its practice he is injuring himself. A great teacher was once asked by one of his disciples to explain the distinction between good and evil, and holding his hand with his fingers pointing downward, he said, "Where is my hand pointing?" And the disciple replied, "It is pointing downward." Then turning his hand upward, the teacher asked, "Where is my hand pointing?" And the disciple answered, "It is pointing upward." "That," said the teacher, "is the distinction between evil and good." By this simple illustration he indicated that evil is merely wrongly directed energy, and good rightly directed energy, and the so-called evil man becomes good by reversing his conduct. To understand the true nature of evil by living in the good is to cease to see other men as evil. Blessed is he who, turning from the evil in others, exerts himself in the purification of his own heart. He shall one day become of too pure eyes to behold evil. Knowing the nature of evil, what does it behoove a man to do? It behooves him to live only in that which is good. Therefore, if a man condemn me, I will not condemn him in return. If he revile me, I will give him kindness. If he slander me, I will speak of his good qualities. If he hate me, then he greatly needs, and shall receive, my love. With the impatient I will be patient, with the greedy I will be generous, and with the violent and quarrelsome I will be mild and peaceable. Seeing no evil, whom should I hate, or who should I regard as my enemy? Were mankind murderous or jealous upon you, my brother, my sister, I'm so sorry for you. They are not murderous or jealous upon me. All has been gentle with me. I keep no account with lamentation. What have I to do with lamentation? He who sees men as evil imagines that behind those acts which are called wicked there is a corporate and substantial evil prompting those particular sins, but he of stainless vision sees the deeds themselves as evil, and knows that there is no evil power, no evil soul or man behind those deeds. The substance of the universe is good. There is no substance of evil. Good alone is permanent. There is no fixed or permanent evil. As brothers and sisters, born of the same parents and being of one household, love each other through all vicissitudes, see no evil in each other, but overlook all errors, and cling together in the strong bonds of affection, even so, the good man sees humanity as one spiritual family, born of the same father and mother, being of the same essence and making for the same goal, and he regards all men and women as his brothers and sisters, makes no divisions and distinctions, sees none as evil, but is at peace with all. Happy is he who attains to this blessed state. End of chapter 8. Recording by Andrea Fiore.